The courtroom was completely silent. I sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded, watching my husband of 32 years squirm in his seat. Judge Anderson leaned forward, his expression unreadable but his eyes sharp. "Mr. Carter, I'm going to ask you one more time." The judge's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "If this $3 million bonus never existed, if you never received it as you claim under oath, then please explain why your firm issued you a W-2 form for exactly that amount last December." I watched Richard's face drain of color. His expensive suit suddenly looked too big on him. His lawyer, the arrogant man who'd called me vindictive and emotional for weeks, went rigid beside him. Richard opened his mouth, but no words came out. His lips moved silently like a fish gasping for air. The courtroom held its breath. Even the court reporter stopped typing, waiting. This was the moment I'd been working toward for 6 months. The moment where all his lies, all his arrogance, all his assumptions that I was too stupid to figure things out would come crashing down. 6 months earlier, everything had seemed normal. Well, as normal as a marriage could be after 32 years. I was in our home office, looking for a phone charger, when Richard's personal phone buzzed on his desk. He was in the shower, and I glanced at the screen without thinking. The message preview made my blood freeze. "Thanks for an amazing weekend, Richard. Can't wait for the next one. Melissa, HR." My stomach twisted into knots. Melissa from HR. His firm's human resources department. An amazing weekend. I stood there holding his phone, my hands shaking, reading those words over and over. Richard had told me he was at a legal conference in Boston that weekend. A boring, mandatory event for partners. I'd believed him completely. Why wouldn't I? In 32 years, I'd never had reason to doubt him. But now, staring at that message, I realized how naive I'd been. How many other conferences had there been? How many late nights preparing for trial were actually something else entirely? I put the phone down exactly where I'd found it and walked to our bedroom like I was in a trance. Sat on the edge of our bed, the one we'd shared for 3 decades, and tried to process what I'd just seen. Richard had always been charming. That's what attracted me to him in law school when we met. He was confident, ambitious, knew exactly what he wanted from life. I'd supported him through the bar exam, through his early years as a struggling associate, through every promotion and partnership offer. Worked full-time as a marketing director while raising our 2 children so he could focus on building his career. But lately, things had been different. More secretive late nights. Extra business trips that seemed to pop up suddenly. New luxury purchases that appeared without explanation. A Rolex he claimed was a gift from a grateful client. Designer suits that cost more than our monthly mortgage. I'd noticed but convinced myself it was just the lifestyle of a successful senior partner. Now I wondered what else I'd been blind to. That night, while Richard slept peacefully beside me, I couldn't rest. At 3 a.m, I got up and went back to his office. Opened his desk drawer slowly, carefully, looking for what I didn't know. Found a credit card statement I'd never seen before. A card in his name only, not our joint accounts. My hands trembled as I read through the charges. $40,000 at Cartier. 2 weeks before our anniversary last month. I'd received nothing for our anniversary. Richard had apologized, said he'd been too busy with a major case, promised to make it up to me later. But he'd spent $40,000 at a jewelry store. The receipt was attached, itemized. A diamond necklace and matching earrings. Custom designed. I felt physically sick. Kept reading. The name on the sales receipt said, Melissa Green. Not Melissa from HR. Melissa Green, with a full name, an address. A person who was wearing jewelry that cost more than most people's annual salary. Jewelry my husband had bought her while forgetting our anniversary entirely. I didn't confront him. Every instinct screamed to storm into our bedroom, throw the statement in his face, demand answers. But something stopped me. Maybe it was 32 years of learning how Richard operated. He was a lawyer, trained to argue, to deflect, to make you doubt your own reality. If I confronted him emotional and unprepared, he'd have excuses ready. He'd make me feel crazy for even asking. So instead, I acted normal. Made breakfast the next morning, kissed him goodbye, went to work like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. At lunch, I called my friend Nathan, who worked as a financial analyst. Explained the situation quietly, my voice shaking. Nathan, if he's cheating, what else could he be hiding? Nathan was silent for a long moment. Amanda, if he's betraying your trust in one area, he's probably betraying it in others too. Cheating and financial deception often go together. He paused. You need a forensic accountant. Someone who can dig into the finances without him knowing. I thanked him and hung up. By that afternoon, I had an appointment scheduled. The forensic accountant, Ms. Torres, was a small woman with sharp eyes and an efficiency that immediately put me at ease. I brought her everything I could access. Bank statements from our joint accounts, credit card records, tax returns from the past 5 years. She reviewed them silently for 2 hours while I sat across from her desk, nervously twisting my wedding ring. Finally, she looked up. Mrs. Carter, I've found something very unusual. My heart raced. What is it? There are large transfers between your husband's law firm and an offshore investment entity. Substantial amounts, moving regularly over the past 18 months. She turned her computer screen toward me. The entity is registered in the Cayman Islands under the name Carter Holdings LLC. I stared at the screen. I've never heard of that company. That's not the strangest part, Ms. Torres continued. The registered agent for this entity is listed under your maiden name. Amanda Brennan. My maiden name. He'd used my identity to hide money offshore. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. I felt like I was falling. I didn't confront Richard about the offshore account either. Instead, I became a spy in my own marriage. Started quietly copying documents when he left his office unlocked. Downloaded emails from his laptop when he was in the shower. Tracked his calendar, noting every discrepancy between what he told me and what actually appeared in his schedule. Ms. Torres had taught me what to look for. Shell companies, unusual transfers, gaps in accounting. And I found plenty. One evening, while Richard was supposedly working late, I found an email invitation in his deleted folder. Private partner retreat at the Bahamas luxury resort. 3 days in February. Spouses not invited. The invitation was addressed to senior partners only, marked confidential. Richard had never mentioned it. I checked our joint calendar where he usually noted his trips. February showed nothing. No travel, no conferences, no retreats. Just normal work days. But the email was clear. He was planning to go. And he was planning to lie about it. February arrived, and Richard told me he had to be in court for an important trial. Would be working late every night that week. Might even sleep at his office a few times to prepare. I nodded sympathetically, packed him meals, played the supportive wife. Then I watched his location on the phone tracking app we'd installed years ago for safety. The dot didn't move to the courthouse. It moved to the airport. I sat at home that evening, tracking his flight path to the Bahamas, feeling strangely calm. The next morning, scrolling through social media, I found it. Another attorney from his firm had posted vacation photos. Partner retreat life, the caption read. The background showed the resort pool. And there, in one photo, lounging on a pool chair with a woman in a red bikini, was Richard. The woman was young, blonde, laughing at something he'd said. I zoomed in. Screenshot. Saved. Another piece of evidence for my growing file. That night, I started planning my exit strategy. I waited until Richard returned from his trial week. Let him settle back in, tell me his elaborate lies about the difficult case, the demanding judge, the late nights at the office. I listened to every word, nodding in all the right places, making sympathetic sounds. Then, on Sunday evening, I made his favorite dinner. Pot roast, roasted vegetables, homemade rolls. Set the table with our good china. He looked surprised but pleased. What's the occasion? I wanted to talk to you about something important, I said calmly, sitting across from him. I want a divorce. Richard actually laughed, set down his fork and looked at me with that condescending smile I'd once found charming. A divorce? Amanda, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You'll never survive without me, he said, still smiling. You have no idea how to manage finances, how to live independently. Everything you have is because of me. I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. We'll see, I said softly. His smile faltered just slightly before he recovered. The next morning, while Richard was at work, I met with attorneys. Not just any attorneys. The biggest rival firm to Richard's practice. Maxwell and Associates, known for handling high-profile divorce cases. Known for being ruthless when needed. The senior partner, Mr. Harrison, reviewed my files for 3 hours. Every document I'd copied, every email I'd saved, every piece of evidence Ms. Torres had compiled. His expression grew darker as he read. Finally, he looked up at me. Mrs. Carter, your husband has made several critical mistakes. First, he underestimated you. Second, he left a paper trail that a first-year law student could follow. And third, he committed fraud. Fraud. Mr. Harrison nodded. Using your identity to register offshore accounts without your knowledge or consent is identity theft and financial fraud. Hiding assets during divorce proceedings is illegal. And if what your forensic accountant suspects is true, he's concealed substantial income. He leaned back in his chair. He's going to regret underestimating you, Mrs. Carter. I promise you that. The divorce proceedings began in March. Richard's attorney filed his financial disclosure, presenting a picture of a comfortable but modest lifestyle. Marital home valued at $800,000. Retirement accounts totaling $1.2 million. Joint savings of $300,000. Everything split down the middle, his lawyer suggested. Fair and simple. But something was missing. Richard received an annual performance bonus every December. As a senior partner at one of the city's top firms, that bonus was substantial. Sometimes $200,000, sometimes more depending on the firm's yearly revenue. Yet his financial disclosure showed no bonus for the previous year. Nothing. Zero. Listed his annual salary at $400,000, but no mention of any additional compensation. I sat in Mr. Harrison's office, pointing to the omission. He always gets a bonus. Always. For 20 years, that bonus paid for our vacations, our home renovations, our children's college funds. Mr. Harrison smiled grimly. And I already know he received one this year. $3 million, to be precise. How did Mr. Harrison know about the bonus? Ms. Torres had continued digging. Found a shell account labeled Carter Consulting Limited. Another offshore entity, this one registered in the British Virgin Islands. Over the past 4 months, $3 million had been transferred into that account from Richard's law firm. Structured to look like consulting fees for services rendered. But Carter Consulting Limited had no website, no business registration, no evidence of providing any actual services. It existed only on paper. A shell company designed to hide money. The interesting part, Ms. Torres explained during our meeting, is the registered address for Carter Consulting. It matches a condominium in the downtown waterfront district. She showed me the property records. The condo was owned by Melissa Green. The same Melissa from the text message. The same Melissa who'd received $40,000 in jewelry. Richard's mistress was living in a luxury condo, and he'd hidden $3 million in a fake company using her address. The arrogance of it was breathtaking. The first official hearing arrived in early April. Both legal teams sat at their respective tables. Judge Anderson, known for being no-nonsense about financial disclosure, presided. He started with a warning. I want to be clear with both parties. Financial deception during divorce proceedings is fraud. It's perjury. It can result in criminal charges, not just civil penalties. I expect complete honesty from both sides." Richard's lawyer, Mr. Stevens, nodded seriously. "Your Honor, my client has been completely transparent. All assets have been properly disclosed." I watched Richard sitting beside his attorney, looking confident, almost bored. He glanced at me once with a slight smirk, like this was all a minor inconvenience. Judge Anderson reviewed the documents, asked a few questions, then set a date for financial cross-examination. "We'll reconvene in 2 weeks. I want full accounting of all income, assets, and financial transactions for the past 2 years." As we left the courtroom, my phone buzzed. An email from an unknown address. Subject line: "Check the Cayman reports." I opened it carefully. Inside were attached files, banking records, transfer receipts, all showing Richard's hidden offshore accounts. I forwarded the anonymous email to Mr. Harrison immediately. He called me within an hour, his voice excited. "Amanda, this is incredible. Whoever sent this has access to Richard's firm's internal financial records." "Who do you think it is?" "Someone who works there. Someone who's disgusted by what he's done." Mr. Harrison paused. "These files show everything. The $3 million bonus routed offshore. The shell companies. The fake consulting fees. It's all here." The next day, I received another email from the same address. This time with a brief message: "I'm a paralegal at his firm. What he's doing is wrong. He's destroyed enough lives." The paralegal, whoever they were, had sent detailed documentation of how Richard had structured his bonus to avoid disclosure. Had it paid to Carter Consulting, then transferred to the Cayman accounts, then slowly moved back through various entities to make the money appear legitimate. "This is career-ending evidence," Mr. Harrison told me. "Financial fraud, perjury, identity theft. When we present this in court, he's finished." I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. For the next 2 weeks, Richard remained confident. At the house, during the few times we still interacted, he talked about his airtight case. How his lawyer had assured him everything was handled properly. How I'd be lucky to get the settlement he was offering. "You should take the deal, Amanda. You're not going to do better than this." I stayed quiet. Let him believe he was winning. Meanwhile, Mr. Harrison and his team worked around the clock. They compiled every email, every transfer record, every piece of evidence from the anonymous paralegal. Cross-referenced it with Ms. Torres's forensic accounting. Built a timeline showing exactly how Richard had hidden $3 million while claiming poverty in his disclosure. The hearing was scheduled for March 14th. 2 weeks that felt like 2 years. I barely slept, running through scenarios in my mind. What if the judge didn't believe us? What if Richard's connections in the legal community protected him? What if I'd miscalculated everything? Mr. Harrison kept reassuring me. "We have him cold. The evidence is irrefutable. Just stay calm and trust the process." 3 days before the hearing, Richard showed up at the house. I'd moved into the guest room weeks earlier, but we still lived under the same roof. Selling or leaving before the divorce was finalized would complicate things legally. He knocked on my door that evening, walked in without waiting for permission. "We need to talk." I looked up from my book, keeping my expression neutral. "About what?" "This divorce is getting ridiculous. You're wasting money on lawyers, dragging this out. Just accept the settlement and move on." His tone was condescending, like he was explaining something to a child. "You're not entitled to a cent more than what I'm offering you." I set my book down carefully. "Richard, you always did underestimate women. What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. I'll see you in court." He stared at me, trying to read my expression. "Finding nothing. You're making a huge mistake, Amanda. When this is over, you're going to regret being so stubborn." He stormed out, slamming the door. What Richard didn't know was that I was wearing a small recording device. Every threat, every condescending word, captured digitally. The hearing began on March 14th at 9 in the morning. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Just the judge, both legal teams, a court reporter, and us. Richard looked polished and confident in his expensive suit. I wore a simple navy dress, no jewelry except my wedding ring. Mr. Stevens started by painting me as vindictive and emotional. Claimed I was dragging out the divorce because I was hurt and angry, not because there were legitimate financial concerns. Your Honor, Mrs. Carter is simply unable to accept that her marriage is over. She's making wild accusations to punish my client. Mr. Harrison sat calmly through the entire presentation, taking notes. When it was his turn to respond, he simply said, "We'll address those accusations with evidence, Your Honor." Judge Anderson looked between both attorneys. "We're here today for financial cross-examination. I want clarity on all assets, all income, all accounts. Mr. Stevens, your client will need to answer questions under oath." Richard nodded confidently. "Happy to, Your Honor." The judge scheduled the cross-examination for the following week. 1 week from today. Be prepared to answer detailed questions about your finances, Mr. Carter. That week was the longest of my life. I couldn't eat, could barely sleep. Paced my bedroom at night, running through everything in my mind. Mr. Harrison tried to reassure me during our preparation sessions. "Amanda, you need to trust the evidence. The paper trail is clear. He's walking into his own trap." But I'd lived with Richard for 32 years. I knew how smooth he could be, how convincing. What if his charm worked on the judge? What if he had explanations I hadn't anticipated? On Friday, 3 days before the cross-examination, I got news that shocked me. Melissa Green had quit Richard's firm. Just submitted her resignation letter and left. No explanation, no transition period. Just gone. I stared at the information Mr. Harrison's investigator had uncovered. "What does this mean?" "It means she's scared," Mr. Harrison said. "She knows what's coming and doesn't want to be anywhere near it when it hits." That night, my phone rang from an unknown number. I answered hesitantly. "Hello, Mrs. Carter. This is Melissa Green." I almost hung up. The woman who'd been sleeping with my husband was calling me directly. But something in her voice stopped me. She sounded terrified. "Please don't hang up. I need to talk to you." I said nothing, letting her continue. "I didn't know. About you, I mean. Richard told me you were divorced years ago, that he lived alone." I believed him. She started crying. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. Why are you calling me?" My voice was cold. "Because I need to tell you the truth. Richard promised me a future together. Said after his divorce was final, we'd get married. He'd take care of me forever. Then suddenly he stopped returning my calls. Stopped answering texts. I went to his office, and security wouldn't let me up." She took a shaky breath. I realized he'd used me. For fun. For sex, for whatever. And now he's throwing me away. "What do you want from me?" "I want to testify. I want to tell the truth. And I have proof." Melissa explained that she had a copy of the transfer memo for the $3 million bonus. Had saved it when she processed the paperwork in HR. "I'll testify. I'll bring everything. He deserves what's coming." The cross-examination began on March 21st. The courtroom felt different this time. Heavier. More serious. Richard sat at his table, still confident but with a slight edge of nervousness now. He'd heard that someone from his firm might be testifying against him. Mr. Harrison started carefully, establishing the basic financial facts. Richard's salary, our joint accounts, the disclosed assets. Then he moved to the real questions. "Mr. Carter, did you receive a performance bonus from your firm in December of last year?" "No, I did not." Richard's voice was steady. The firm had a difficult year. Bonuses were suspended. Are you certain about that? Completely certain. Mr. Harrison pulled out a document. This is a transfer record from your firm's accounting department. It shows a payment of $3 million to Carter Consulting Limited on December 15th. Can you explain this? Richard didn't even blink. That's a consulting fee for legal services I provided to an outside client. Completely separate from my firm's salary. And Carter Consulting Limited, that's your company? Yes. Judge Anderson leaned forward. Mr. Carter, why wasn't this consulting income disclosed in your financial statements? Richard shifted in his seat. Your Honor, I didn't consider it relevant. The consulting company is separate from marital assets. $3 million isn't relevant. The judge's tone was sharp. Where is this money now? It's in a business account, being held for tax purposes and future investment. Richard was starting to sound less confident. Mr. Harrison pulled out more documents. Your Honor, we have banking records showing that Carter Consulting Limited is a shell company. It has no clients, no employees, no evidence of providing any actual services. Richard's lawyer stood up. Objection, Your Honor. These documents haven't been properly authenticated. They're authenticated, Mr. Harrison replied calmly. We have testimony from the firm's accounting department ready to verify everything. Judge Anderson looked at Richard directly. Mr. Carter, I'm going to ask you one more time, and I remind you that you are under oath. If this $3 million bonus never existed, if you never received it as you claim, then please explain why your firm issued you a W-2 form for exactly that amount last December. The courtroom went completely silent. Richard's face drained of all color. His mouth opened but no sound came out. Richard's lawyer jumped to his feet. Your Honor, may we request a brief recess to consult with my client? Judge Anderson's expression was ice-cold. No, Mr. Stevens. Your client has had months to prepare accurate financial disclosures. He can answer the question now. Richard stammered something incoherent. Started to explain, stopped, started again. The confident attorney who'd spent 30 years arguing cases was completely speechless. The W-2 form, Judge Anderson continued, is a federal tax document. It was filed with the IRS. Are you claiming your firm committed tax fraud? No, Your Honor, I. Richard trailed off. Mr. Harrison stood. Your Honor, we have additional evidence. Text messages, emails, and testimony from Ms. Melissa Green, who can verify Mr. Carter's attempts to hide assets. She's here today and ready to testify. Richard's face went white as paper. By noon, the word had spread. Richard's firm received notice of the hearing and immediately opened an internal investigation. By 2 that afternoon, he was suspended pending review. I sat in the courtroom watching everything unfold. Watched Richard's perfect life disintegrate in real time. His reputation, his career, his carefully constructed lies. All of it falling apart. Mr. Harrison leaned over and whispered, "We're going for full asset redistribution plus penalties for fraud." The judge's ruling came 2 weeks later. I sat in the courtroom, hands folded, as Judge Anderson read through his decision. After reviewing all evidence, testimony, and financial records, this court finds that Mr. Carter deliberately concealed substantial assets during divorce proceedings. He committed perjury, financial fraud, and identity theft. Richard sat motionless as the judge continued. Mrs. Carter is awarded 50% of all marital assets as is standard in this jurisdiction. Additionally, due to Mr. Carter's fraudulent concealment, the entire $3 million in the hidden offshore account is awarded to Mrs. Carter as penalty damages. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Richard's lawyer tried to object, but Judge Anderson cut him off. Furthermore, Mr. Carter will be responsible for all legal fees on both sides. I'm also referring this case to the State Bar for disciplinary review. I felt tears building but refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. By that evening, the media had picked up the story. Top attorney caught hiding $3 million bonus during divorce. It spread across legal blogs, local news, social media. Richard's reputation was destroyed overnight. Richard lost his partnership at the firm within a month. The internal investigation found multiple violations of ethics rules. They terminated him quietly to avoid more bad publicity. He lost the house in the settlement. I sold it immediately, not wanting any reminder of our marriage. With my portion of the assets and the $3 million, I bought something I'd always dreamed of. A coastal house overlooking the ocean. 3 bedrooms, huge windows, a porch where I could watch the sunset every evening. Richard had always said we could never afford a beach house. That it was an impractical luxury. Now I owned one outright, no mortgage, in my name alone. I hired a designer to make it exactly how I wanted. Bright colors, comfortable furniture, nothing that reminded me of my old life. One evening, as I was unpacking boxes, my phone buzzed. A message request on social media from Melissa Green. Can we talk? I need closure. I think you might too. I stared at the message for a long time before finally responding. Coffee. Tuesday. 10 a.m. Melissa looked different than I'd expected. Younger, yes, but also smaller somehow. Less like the villain I'd imagined and more like another person Richard had used. We sat in a quiet coffee shop, both uncomfortable. Thank you for meeting me, she said quietly. I wasn't sure you would. I needed to hear your side. Over the next hour, Melissa told me everything. How Richard had pursued her relentlessly. How he'd lied about being divorced, about loving her, about their future. How she'd believed every word until the truth became unavoidable. I lost my job, my reputation, everything, she said. But I deserved it. What I did was wrong. You were lied to, I replied. He's good at that. We talked until the coffee shop closed. Found unexpected common ground in our shared experience of Richard's manipulation. When we parted, we weren't friends exactly, but we'd both found a kind of closure. As I drove home along the coastal road, windows down, ocean breeze in my hair, I thought about everything that had happened. Richard had tried to hide everything. Money, truth, respect, our entire marriage. But in the end, he'd only hidden himself. Me. I'd found something better. Found my own strength, my own voice, my own worth. Found myself. Justice doesn't need revenge, I realized. Sometimes it just needs patience. And the courage to keep the receipts.